This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The 16th Asian Financial Forum has just concluded in Hong Kong. As the first mega financial event of the year, the forum came on the heels of the reopening of the border between Hong Kong and the mainland. How will Hong Kong stimulate regional development? Can the global economy successfully recover in 2023? And what role will China play in global innovation development? To find out, I'm joined today by Witman adjunct professor from the City University of Hong Kong, Professor Iain Begg from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and Professor Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to the discussion. Witman, I will start with you. The Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee said at the event, I quote, "The forum is the first flagship financial event held in different format to kickstart the new year. Hong Kong has long been a leading global financial center, and the global financial leaders' visit to Hong Kong solidifies our important role in the region and the world at large. So this is a very important event to Hong Kong, and also probably this is the beginning, you can say, Hong Kong's full return to normalcy."
There was a headline on one of the newspapers that says Hong Kong means business, right? Hong Kong's back. I think this event marks the beginning of a series of these kind of large international events. I didn't attend the AFF opening, but I attended some of the other seminars, and I was speaking this morning in one of the forums as well. And it was a lot of people coming back to Hong Kong. They're very happy to see old friends. And also this year, I think the forum focused on the GBA, the Greater Bay Area, as well as the RCEP, and also on green, on technology, innovations. A lot of excitement I can see from all the attendants. And really, Hong Kong, there has always been, kind of like negative news on the global news media, but this time, when these are leaders in the financial industry, people who love business and also love Hong Kong, they come back, and they're glad to be back.
Well, John, as we mentioned about these key factors, RCEP and also green technology, GBA, Great Bay Area basically includes Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and major cities in the region. Of course, the borders being open between Hong Kong and the mainland, and of course here we are talking about the financial. Then there's a key element there, the finance and technology. The relationship, how important is that?
Well, first of all, Hong Kong, like many cities in China, has been boiled down into this, battle with the pandemic, and for a long time, for quite some few years, for the last 2 to 3 years, Hong Kong's economy has been adversely affected. And we all know the financial sector is one of the pillar industries in this city, in this great city. And on top of this, there's been, a whole bunch of, bad mouthing of Hong Kong by some Western politicians, and that is especially about, the financial viability as a financial center in the world. Some doubt about Hong Kong's future, and now I think with this great event, it's a resounding answer from the SAR government that says that Hong Kong is coming back, and I think given the broader context that we are probably are going to put this pandemic thing behind us for good, I think Hong Kong as a financial center is finally coming back. And I think it's very significant in that sense. And I think Hong Kong's financial sector will be still very much in the play because of its close proximity to China, its close relationship with China, especially in the area of RMB being more and more like a international currency, and Hong Kong absolutely is a center of offshore RMB activities around the world. So I think it's in that regard that Hong Kong's event today, the financial forum is so significant, it's so important. It marks the beginning of this industry coming back.
Mm-hmm. Well, Witman, another obviously aspect to this event is, for example, the Hong Kong. We're talking about the role of Hong Kong in this region and on the global stage. At the event, Thailand, for example, have expressed their willingness to work with Hong Kong on innovation-based development and business investment. How do people in Hong Kong, or yourself included, see the role of Hong Kong in this region or in the world?
I think very importantly, Hong Kong always played the role of the financial center of Asia. So all the investment, asset management, all kind of financing activities, they happen here because you have to have a concentration with all kinds of, not just the bankers, the finance industry, but also the supporting industries such as the legal, accounting, and the others. It's funny you mentioned Thailand. I know there's one project that's been going on called Ambridge, which is a central bank digital currency project. It's a partnership between Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the Central Bank of People's Bank of China, and then the Bank of Thailand, and then the Bank of UAE. So these four central banks, or Hong Kong MA is not a central bank, but equivalent, they are working together to create an exchange for this kind of new development, the central bank digital currencies, which is really pioneering in the future in terms of international currency, exchange, as well as trade settlement. So this kind of thing, I think Hong Kong has been very strong in our traditional, universities and research and development. And then next to our neighbor, which is Shenzhen, they are very strong in application of technology as well as manufacturing of all these electronics and communication technologies. So the combination of the two, we actually can do a lot of things, and including the area of fintech, which is one of the focuses here. Another area that has been a focus of this year's forum is the Hong Kong government had announced almost end of last year that it will support digital assets, crypto assets. Now, this is the first time that Hong Kong government actually announced its full plan of supporting this new thing. And this also attracted a lot of global investors who are interested in this new, very pioneering area of digital assets. So I met quite a few of those investors recent days, and they are all so eager to say to look at the details of the new regulatory framework for digital assets in Hong Kong, and they want to build their companies here.
Mm-hmm. Well, technology, the role, important role in the financial service sector. And also, there is a sense, of course, the optimism about Hong Kong, about Hong Kong's development, the future, but also about the global economy. When asked about this year's global economic outlook, close to 70% of the respondents at the event indicated a neutral or positive sentiment. But earlier this month, IMF chief basically warned that a third of the global economy will be in recession. So Iain, what's your take on the seems different projections here?
Well, I think one answer is that the only thing that is good about economic forecasters is that they make weather forecasters look like excellent scientists. The trouble at the moment is there are so many sources of uncertainty in the global economy. What Kristalina Georgieva was saying reflected the work done by her teams across the world in saying there are many countries which are struggling with inflation. There are many countries which are struggling with the consequences of the pandemic, not maybe the pandemic directly, but the aftermath of it, which has in some cases reduced labor forces and put pressure on prices. There are big geopolitical uncertainties, most obviously from what's going on in Ukraine. So what you have to do in forecasting is, on the one hand, try to project from the empirical trends that you see in the past, but also try to take account of the many wild cards, if I can put it that way, which hover over the global economy. Could there be a resurgence of the pandemic? is the unlocking of the controls in China something that's going to lead to new strains of the coronavirus, which could be damaging? Is there going to be an escalation or a resolution in Ukraine? These are the kinds of things which make it far more difficult than normal to try to project where the global economy is going. I think at a micro level, many businesses will feel optimistic, but at a macroeconomic level, there are these big concerns weighing on what can realistically be expected.
John, how do you foresee the global economy in 2023? And it seems like, at least in Asia or in China, Hong Kong, you do see there's this optimistic sense of optimism about the new year.
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic. Even I'm optimistic about the economy in the United States. Actually, I think the typically after such an extended period of a pandemic, usually the global economy should be recovering fine, and it should be a quite extended period of time of strong growth immediately after that. I mean, this is by historic precedents, and we all understand that. But the problem is that we have a war going on in Ukraine, and as a result, the oil price is going up, driving everything up, and as a result, also partly as a result of these measures that designed to help the consumers. A lot of quantitative easing going on is a lingering effect of inflation, and inflation has been very strong in the United States and North America, other parts of North America, and also in European Union territories as well. However, we don't have such a problem in China. As a matter of fact, the inflation rate in China is very modest, and the problem is mostly associated with inadequate demand. And China is probably one of the last countries to totally adjust the COVID policy, and we're just starting to opening up. So I think all indications are pointing to the fact that at least in China, the economies are coming back pretty strong. You go to the streets in Beijing, in Shanghai, the restaurants are getting full, we're getting traffic jams, and the malls are starting to be packed right now. These are all very good indications. Now, what I think is what's happening right now is that we have already past the initial stage of sort of like a structural adjustment around the world in response to the war in Ukraine, of high flying oil prices initially. Now we're starting to see Europe diverting away from Russian energy supply, sort of on a permanent basis in my view. And I think the days of high flying oil prices are probably behind us. We're starting to see oil prices stabilized at current level, and I really don't see the prices going up anytime soon. And that bodes very well. I mean, you look at the inflation figure in the United States; they just announced at 6.5% last quarter, and there's some market speculation that at least the scale and size of interest rate hikes on the part of the Feds is probably slowing down. So I think these are all very good signs. Probably Europe is still going to be very much boiled down because of this war in Ukraine. But I think at least in North America, in China, we're adjusting quite fine actually. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I forecast the GDP growth rate for this year in China will be at least 5%. And actually in the United States, you look at the job market, you look at other indicators, the economy is actually doing quite fine. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a soft landing, in the American economy, if there's such a thing called recession going on right now. But nevertheless, I would say, barring Europe, the global recession is probably not going to be as severe as in the, for example, the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. I don't think it's going to be like this.
Mm-hmm. But then here's a interesting another point with this survey, for example, about the geopolitics, the element. When asked about the major challenges facing growth in 2023, 60% of the participants said they believed in the intensifying geopolitical risks will pose the biggest threat. Of course, we know that U.S. pointed to Russia and China and seeing the two countries as biggest challenge. And then Putin, the president of Russia, warned that next 10 years will be probably the most dangerous decade. And of course, China is concerned with the U.S. activity in Asia, in particular military activity over Taiwan or support of the independence of Taiwan. That might create a lot of instability. So Witman, what's your expectation of the coming year? Yes, there's a economic and trade relationship, I would say strong between China and the U.S., China and Europe. But at the same time, we do see there's a geopolitical shift and even sometimes conflict there.
Yeah, the geopolitical tension is going to stay there. I don't think it's going to ease. But I'm optimistic. I met with over 100 private equity investors this morning, and they're all quite bullish. I mean, there are different focuses. Okay, China, there will be a gradual growth, but also Southeast Asia. Okay, the RCEP countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. They're all very bullish about these, regions, and I'm already, they're looking at different kind of growth model where, if for things like for countries like Vietnam, it's like the old China model. It's a lot of manufacturing. There's a lot of things going on there. If you look at Indonesia with 200 million people, it's a growing economy, a lot of consumption and infrastructure building. And in China, is solidifying the new. There will be technology-driven new manufacturing, but at the same time, the 400 million middle class that have been formed in the past few years, past 10 years, they are encouraged to spend. I mean, this is what I think John was just mentioning. Because there's an understanding there, and we try to in China they try to encourage consumption, and if these people consume, there is a large market. Just this 400 million middle class in China is the same size, population size of America, right? So I think, yes, there will be tensions, but in terms of normal trade, especially regional trade between China and the other RCEP countries, that will increase. I mean, the ASEAN countries now become the biggest trading partner of China and Hong Kong. So I'm seeing a lot of activities there, as well as I think finance is back to very bullish because prices are low. This morning I heard many times that asset prices are way lower than 3 years ago, and this is the time to buy. Of course, we'll be very careful. We have to be very careful when the pandemic may rebound. There are geopolitical tensions. There are certain technology war between America and China, which will affect some of the manufacturing, for example, in chips. So these things, but then they also create other activities, right? So so maybe you can invest now in chip manufacturers in China because they have to manufacture their own. So from the investor point of view, there's always opportunities. And right now, because of the pessimistic, tension by some other people, it's probably the right time to invest.
Well, full of optimism. Iain, how do you see, how big is the geopolitical risk? If you, of course, if you have a look at Asian countries, all the region, it seems like they are quite strong in terms of expectation, in terms of growth, probably.
Yes, I think it's certainly true to say that Asia, especially Southeast Asia, is in a strong position. I'm less sure about India because of the domestic constraints there. However, the whole point about geopolitical risks is it's the one that you don't expect that comes out to hit you when you least anticipate it. So we have to be aware that strange things can happen in such a febrile environment. I'm sitting here thinking that the image of China and the US is a bit like two Japanese sumo wrestlers pacing round the dojo ring before they actually engage in a very short combat. So I know that the US and China are trying to feel out what each other want to do in this, and I don't think they're going to come to blows. I think they're going to find ways of accommodating this, which is possibly the biggest ever geopolitical risk if things went wrong between China and the US. In Europe, things are maybe not as negative as we think, not least because Vladimir Putin has failed to send cold Siberian weather in our direction. Europe so far has enjoyed a rather warm winter, and that has a very positive effect on the cost of gas, not just lower consumption, but pushing down the cost of gas. So I think that the chances are that Europe will come out of this rather more rapidly than we expect. But there is still a big tension over inflation. Inflation requires adjustment. If you adjust too slowly to inflation or allow it to become entrenched in the system by feeding into wages, then it extends the pain. I think what's happening in Europe at the moment is we see some strikes in some countries, Labour trying to get more of the share of GDP. But what's likely to happen is that the authorities will not ramp up interest rates. John is correct in that. Interest rates are still negative in real terms, so they give incentives to investment. So it seems to me that the worst we can expect is a very mild recession in Europe, and there's a real possibility that it will turn into renewed growth quite soon, maybe in the second semester of this year.
That's not probably better than many people expected. And also, if you look at, focus a little bit on Asia, John, the Asian share of the global GDP is now currently 45%, and is likely to exceed 50% by 2030, less than 10 years. Asia has also risen as an innovation powerhouse, contributing to more than half of the world patents. Are we seeing, many people would say the arrival of the Asian era, or or at least we are seeing the investment or the economic growth, mostly will come from this region?
Absolutely. The Asian era has already arrived, in my view. This area, entire area, the ASEAN market, I call it ASEAN market, is the epicenter of the world economic activities right now. I think, look at what's happening in these countries like Vietnam, like Thailand, to some extent Philippines as well, Indonesia. I mean, these are the things happening exactly what happened in the 1990s, 2000 timeframe in China. Look at the growth rates of Vietnam, for example. Look at the exports growth of Vietnam. It's exactly the same thing that's happening, like we happened here in China 20 years ago. And on top of the tremendous growth driven by manufacturing, I would also add that there are also a lot of activities on the development and research side as well. Companies are moving their R&D activities also into these countries, not just manufacturing. I mean, this is I look at the growth pattern of this country. It just reminds me of what happened in China 20 years ago. Exactly the same thing. And I think on top of this, also there's very strong population growth, demographic change happening as well in this region. Unlike countries in Northeast Asia, like here in China, in South Korea, in Japan, countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, they still have very vibrant population growth. The population is overall structure is still very young. That means consumption. That means demand. So I think this is going to be an area that gives a lot of promises for the future. And I think China is in a great position to benefit from this because of our Belt and Road Initiative. We are heavily engaged in this area economically. I can't go on without mentioning this railway, right? I mean, we built this railway from China's Yunnan province all the way to the Laos-Thailand border, and it's going to be further extending into the Thailand and maybe even one day reaching Singapore, someday. So, these are the infrastructure projects that are going to contribute immensely to the economic growth in this region. And thankfully, we're also benefiting from the prosperity in this region as well.
Speak of benefiting from this prosperity, we'll take a look at the role of Hong Kong probably in terms of innovation. We know that despite these successes, economic successes, Asian countries still face challenges in fostering innovation-led growth. Innovation in Asia is increasingly concentrated in only a handful of firms. According to the World Bank Enterprise Service report, less than 30% of firms in developing Asia introduced any innovation over the past 3 years. So Witman, what is the obstacle here, for more innovation, more business to innovate, and also what kind of a role Hong Kong or larger focus China could play?
Yeah, the important is investment. You need money, you need finance. I'm from the technology industry. We know very clearly that innovation, there's a lot of risk. When you try to develop something, it may fail. So you need venture capital. Okay, so in the past, I think there's a lack of venture capital in Asia as a whole, and especially in these developing countries. I mean, because there's not enough projects to sustain such investment. But nowadays, it's actually changing. I went to Jakarta 2 months ago. I mean, there are actually technology application and adaptation can be very fast. The development takes the time to accumulate, and you also need the talents as well. But once you reach a certain point, then you can quickly roll out the technology easily. You just copy from your neighbors, right? So what I'm seeing, the role Hong Kong can play, we can become the venture capital center of Asia. I mean, we are already doing it. We have changed our tax regime last year for the what we call limited partnership funds, so LPFs and family offices. Singapore is doing similar things. So what we're doing is that we try to attract all this venture capital to set up their office and headquarters in Hong Kong, where money you can move your money free at any time in a second, and then there's a very friendly tax regime, and this money can be then channeled towards those innovation projects both in Greater Bay Area as well as in Southeast Asia. And also another thing I'm seeing is the Chinese technology companies are now going out. They're going out into not only Southeast Asia but also into the Middle East. And I have a lot of friends. Actually, I have 2 friends from Hong Kong who's now working in the Middle East, implementing technology projects there for Chinese technology companies. So these are the trends, and China can export its technology as well as channel through some of its venture capitals to help to build those local innovation capabilities in these countries.
Mm-hmm. Iain, from your point of view, what can Asian countries and the Asian businesses do to further, to do better, I would say, to innovate in terms of business models, in terms of technology?
Well, I'll make 2 telegraphic points. The first is that concentration of innovation is a feature everywhere. If you look across Europe or look across the United States, it's geographically very, very concentrated, and it's also concentrated in some of the biggest, most innovative companies. So there's nothing unusual in a limited number of companies being innovators. And the second thing I'll say is to mention one continent that hasn't yet surfaced in today's discussion, and that is Africa. Africa has the potential to be a source of new demand in the global economy in a way which we sometimes underestimate, given the rapid growth of its population and its gradual elevation into a more developed economy than it has been in the past. So the big opportunity for Asian companies may well be not so much, well, not only Southeast Asia, but also the potential to move to Africa.
Mm-hmm. John, what do you see in terms of innovation in China? Go ahead.
Right. So, right. Yeah. So, just on top of this, just to add on to this, I want to mention Middle East as well. There's something going on that we actually don't notice much, but it's happening in a big way. China's technology cooperation with some countries in the Middle East, for example, in Israel, in UAE, United Arab Emirates. With Qatar, for example, they're booming. I know of high-tech executives, engineers from China working in Dubai, for example, in Abu Dhabi, and not to say, for example, in here in Tel Aviv. All these things are happening at the same time. So I think, in general, in my view, Asia is actually really coming back. This area used to be colonized for the most part by the Western powers, but today it's coming back in a strong way. The Northeast Asia is fully developed, in my view. The Southeast Asia is catching up, and I think at this point even the Arab world is finding their time of the day to catch up. So a lot of things are happening in Asia right now.
Well, also part of Asia, the big Asia, let's say, rising. With that, we come to the end for today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.